All right, welcome back. Growing outrage in California as a biological male dominates in first place, winning 3 state girls track and field championships.
Our next guest has been calling out the unfairness since she was forced to compete against a trans swimmer in college and has made the fight for women's sports her mission.
Host of the Gains for Girls podcast and Outkick.com, Riley Gaines. She's America's #1 feminist as far as I'm concerned. The only one really standing up for women in sports on that level. And we just thank you for being here. So what's your take on this? I mean, by the way, I hear the mother of the trans athlete, this man who's robbed these women of their trophies and their awards, is now speaking out as well. It's sort of like, where are all the parents for all the girls?
Yeah, it's tragic. This boy's mom has actually sent out cease and desist to those who are willing to advocate against his participation in the women's category. First and foremost, it was not just California this happened in this past week. This happened in 5 states. Boys taking a girl's rightful spot as state champion, qualifying spots, podium spots in California, Washington, Oregon, Minnesota, and Maine. That is 5 states that have blatantly and defiantly ignored federal law, that federal law being Title IX, and, of course, Donald Trump's most recent executive order.
So how old were you when you first started to have to engage in this topic?
So this was in 2022,
right,
when I had to compete against the male that you saw on screen just a minute ago. And so, 3 years past that.
So what is it like to be, 22 at the time, to be still a very young woman, you're a grown woman, but to be a young, and you are trying to talk the most basic common sense to adults and institutions and government entities, which are telling you something that is completely bonkers, and then also calling you names for saying what is clearly true?
I mean, I still have to pinch myself that this 3 years later is something that we're still talking about, that Democrats are doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on. But you ask how it feels. Truthfully, it feels like betrayal. That's how I feel, right? Institutions that were in place, people who are in place, their job it is to protect us, they're failing entirely, whether that's parents, whether that's coaches, whether that's the NCAA, whether that's governors like Gavin Newsom, whether that's the CIF, the governing body of interscholastic sports in the state of California. It feels like total and utter betrayal.
And this is, look, an 80-20, maybe a 90-10 issue, and I think a lot of Democrats out there kind of know that internally. We saw California Governor Gavin Newsom have Charlie Kirk on his podcast and admit, yes, it's unfair to have men playing in women's sports. Yet, has he introduced any legislation in California to change that?
No. He's done the exact opposite of that, which President Trump, he put him in the hot seat this past week. He put out a Truth Social post saying, look, if federal law is not adhered to, I will take action. This could even result in permanent action, and that means pulling of the federal funds. Here we are. Gavin Newsom, again, has done nothing. So I hope it has been enough with the warnings. I hope we see some action, whether that's the Department of Education getting involved, whether that's hopefully the Department of Justice getting involved, because ultimately I think that's what it's going to take.
So somebody else is trying to get involved. His name is Keith Olbermann, and he's been like trolling you. It's like he wants to get into your spotlight or something. Here's what he said. He said this: she finished 85th in the Olympic trials. She finished tied for 5th in the only race including a transgendered athlete. If there had been none, she might have finished tied for 4th or had 5th place to herself. Riley Gaines was somehow a worse swimmer than she is a MAGA stooge. So what was your response to this old man trying to
creepy old man.
Creepy old man.
Truthfully, I expect nothing less from a former ESPN host who cannot seem to keep a job anywhere, for that matter. Couple of things here. I finished 85th at Olympic trials, the highest stage where only the top 1% of the top 1% are able to compete anyways, when I was 15 years old. So besides the point, my response to this, truthfully, was, Keith Olbermann, put your money where your mouth is. I happily challenged him to a race. He can pick the setting. He can pick the distance. I will even give him a 30-second head start.
I don't think anybody wants to see him in a pool.
No one wants to see him in a Speedo, going back to the conversation you guys had earlier.
Speedo crowd.
Alone by himself.
Keith Olbermann is the thigh guy. It's his thigh guy
Please
summer.
don't invite him to get into a
He
We don't want to see
tweeted
that.
at me yesterday calling ICE terrorists, too. So
Did you see what he
he's all over the
tweeted
place.
just today in response to Cory Booker, what CNN, MSNBC, when Elon Musk did the salute or the wave, the heartfelt gesture, really? They called it a Nazi salute. Keith Olbermann has gone to X this morning to say how Cory Booker and Elon, it was totally different because Cory Booker's thumb was out from his hand. This man is delusional and senile and lives in his mom's basement.
Well, we
Yeah,
are
he
so
totally does.
grateful to you for everything you do, but one of the things we're really grateful to you for is dealing with Keith Olbermann so the rest of us don't
Someone's
have
got to do it.
So thank you
Someone's
so
got to do it. It's
Riley,
my public
She's taking on the feminists. She's taking on Keith Olbermann, and she's saving women's sports, and we're so grateful for that.
And you're a
Well,
great
thank you,
patriot.
guys.
Good to
Thank
see
you,
you.
guys. Good to see you guys.
Well, still to come this morning, did the Bidens miss?
It really started affecting me physically. The stress of that I was lying to parents and to everyone, and it was against everything I believe in. I had to do a lot of prayer.
That was Melissa Batty-Smoose, a former San Jose State University volleyball coach who is now suing the school, saying she was fired for raising concerns about a transgender athlete on the team. That athlete, Blair Fleming, was at the center of a scandal last year that saw some teams forfeit games against San Jose State. Batty-Smoose says she was fired after filing a Title IX complaint in which she alleged the university had showed favoritism toward Fleming and withheld knowledge about the player's birth gender. Watch this.
Who would ever guess this, that I would have to, in my 30 years career, have to, take on something like this. I was like, something's wrong with this picture. Oh, by the way, Blair is, trans.
A male.
Both Todd Kress and the administration, Laura Alexandra, was not allowed to talk about that, allow parents to know or anyone to know. The same thing that they were doing to the athletes, they were doing to me, threatening me to fire me.
The lawsuit was filed against the California State University Board of Trustees, which oversees San Jose State. It reads in part this way. The school's actions in suspending and terminating Batty-Smoose were not based on her job performance, but were in direct retaliation for her opposition to sex discrimination and her advocacy for the fairness and equal access to programs, services, and activities for female athletes, end of quote. We have now reached out to San Jose State for any comment. We have yet to hear back. So it was interesting while that was playing out, you made the comment, but this is where most of the country is now on her side. Things are different than they were a few months ago as well because of what the president has done by executive order.
Yes, newsflash, everybody. February 5th, the Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports executive order was signed by President Trump. And something happened over the summer very quietly. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee changed the eligibility rules. They are now, for the Olympics coming up, biological men cannot play in sports against female athletes. Ooh. Remember the controversy we talked about on this program with the boxers? That they quietly changed that small little paragraph in their decision making. Things are changing, things are shifting, and I hope somebody out there offers her a new position. She seems wonderful.
So if the landscape changes, what does that do to her lawsuit against San Jose State? Can she win?
I think absolutely. I mean, the whole thing is arising out of this idea of what is Title IX for? What is it supposed to be protecting against? It was designed to protect women. It was designed to make sure that women weren't discriminated against, particularly in sports, but it's not entirely directed at sports. But I think if the administration is taking a change in the way that it views that, it will absolutely affect that lawsuit. I'm a father of 3 little girls, 5, 3, and 1.
So you're outnumbered.
I am outnumbered. I live outnumbered. I'm blessed. I love them. They're little. They haven't entered sports yet. But I think about these things, and it's not even so much thinking about them from, what'll Title IX mean? What will it stand for? But just from a safety perspective, I'm thinking, would I want them playing sports? Some of these aren't contact, but they still involve a certain amount of physicality that could affect their safety. And that's something I think needs to be worked out in addition to the legal issues.
I love where you just took us. Kennedy, what about the athletes? Like, you're playing against San Jose State and you forfeit because of some of these very salient issues of injury potential, so on and so forth, or maybe it's based on principle. They don't get that time back. They don't get their young sports careers back to redo those games.
Yeah, especially when they're also subject to the same kind of retaliation that this coach has been.
Right.
And there are some very real ramifications here. There are people who, and the argument has turned the tide against them, but there are people who are still arguing that trans athletes should be able to play in women's leagues. And it's not fair unless you're going to completely scrap Title IX and allow women to use performance-enhancing drugs, including testosterone, so they can, try and do whatever they can to level the biological playing field. Then someone has to grow a spine, as the IOC eventually did, in order to protect women. That is not a bad thing. And it's actually trying to capitulate has made things so much more divisive and unsafe. And, it's like, I'm not a lawyer yet. The day is young. But I think she does have a case here. And I think anyone who has lost their careers, lost scholarships, lost places on the podium, they do as well. And these schools realize that this administration is being far more aggressive than any other past administration. And that's why you're seeing places like Harvard and Columbia and eventually UCLA all fall in line, because they know those sweet, sweet federal dollars will be withheld if they continue to FAFO.
I was just thinking, though, no matter what we as women would do, being a linebacker in the NFL, there are not enough hormones to get to be 350 pounds at 6'7". Like that, it's always going to be, we're different.
Yeah, so digging into the legal stuff here for a second, I think it's important. I want listeners to understand that non-renewing a contract can still be retaliation. I think she's a strong case. I think she's going to win. And I think what's really interesting is that her original complaint to begin with, guys, sort of represented a lot more than just some type of HR action or on behalf of just one coach, because the chilling effect was really huge here. And as we talk about the culture, and sort of the overgeneralized statement about, that we're losing scholarships, yes, but there was a massive culture where coaches were instructed and other athletes were instructed, don't talk to this person, don't talk to their parents, don't mention it at all, don't even bring it up. And so part of this is woven into the fabric of her now 2 lawsuits, which state that because of that, you're totally infringing on my ability to advocate for these actual girls, for themselves, and there was a climate of fear. And I think the retroactive nature of these decisions is so unfortunate, because there's no way that they can restore those lost opportunities. But I think that the main thing, too, was that for a lot of years now, particularly under the Biden administration's reign, a lot of people lived, as she just was describing there, physical sickness under threat of termination or being kicked off the team or discipline or retaliation socially, by the way, online as well, for these young girls that were shunned in many different ways, kicked off the team, et cetera, including suspensions from school for daring to speak up for themselves. So I hope this is a seminal case, and reminder that the injunctive relief she is requesting sort of tests the limits of Title IX. I know this president cares deeply about it and has laid down the law in that way, but hopefully the Ninth Circuit might catch up to 2025.
Americans are abandoning woke culture in droves, but Family Feud, well, they didn't get the memo. This week, they featured a fully transgender team, and it was what you expect.
I take it short or long. It's okay to freeball. We are not a monolith. She's speaking for herself. Yeah. Some of us are without the B word.
Yeah, but this isn't the only family feuding. Democrats are splitting apart on transgender issues, especially in regards to sports. Now that organizations like the World Athletics are actually requiring women to, be women to compete in female sports, Democrats like Gavin Newsom and Pete Buttigieg, they're switching gears.
Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It is an issue of fairness. So it's deeply unfair.
Would you speak?
The issue of fairness is completely legit.
Most reasonable people would recognize that there are serious fairness issues if you just treat this as not mattering when a trans athlete wants to compete in women's sports.
But this isn't going over so well with every Democrat. Transgender Rep. Sarah McBride doesn't like the sudden pivot towards common sense by some members of the party.
Gavin Newsom recently said that he believes transgender athletes shouldn't compete in women's sports. Do you worry about an overcorrection here?
I do believe that those statements have been overcorrections. Republicans are the ones that are obsessed with this issue.
Jerry, explain how this is an overcorrection. Because, I mean, every poll,
it's not an overcorrection.
Every indicator shows this is 80-20, 90-10 among Americans.
I just have no patience for this issue.
Yeah.
Because, look, young women with Title IX, they finally got their day in the sun, right? And now we're taking it all apart. We don't care. We don't care that young women have this unfair competition in sport. I don't agree with it at all. I don't think it's right. There has to be some other kind of solution out there. And I want to know, where are all the moms out there of young girls? You know, where are the Tiger moms who should be defending their daughters out there? I'm sorry, this just makes me really mad.
That's okay. Viewers enjoy you getting mad because they're sitting there mad too. And you're speaking for them. Joe, you like sports, you cover sports, you follow sports, you understand the nuance of it. You also cover culture, and someone like Gavin Newsom being out there as much as he is. Yeah. His flip-flopping, does it carry any water at all anymore? But I don't know that anyone believes anything he says anymore.
Always base a politician, or anyone for that matter, on their actions instead of their words, especially somebody as phony as Gavin Newsom. Because in California, he signed into law allowing men to play against women in sports. And he could very easily now put forth another law basically pulling that back, and he won't do it. So, yeah, he'll talk a good game with Charlie Kirk. But in the end, until I see him pull back that law and say this is not right, like President Trump has stood up for many years, then I don't want to buy it. Same with Pete Buttigieg. You know, he wants to be president really, really bad, just like Gavin Newsom does. But when Joe Biden pushed this policy a couple of years ago, he was number one behind it. And now he's saying all the right things because polls tell him what to say. You don't know what they believe in this situation.
Yeah, but he's not helping enforce it either. That's part, in California. That's part of the problem. Yeah. Molly, this transgender issue, it's not just an American issue. We got this story from the United Nations. So this woman's name is Reem Al-Salim, and they're calling her the J.K. Rowling of the UN. And if you don't know, J.K. Rowling is an advocate for women. She also wrote Harry Potter. So the UN, this is their expert on violence against women, and she's catching heat for saying this.
I never imagined the day would come where my mandate would deem it necessary to prepare a report affirming that the words women and girls refer to distinct biological and legal categories, and that their female sex is central not only to the definition as categories of humans, but also central to the understanding of the discrimination and violence that they experience.
Yeah, she's also been met with a barrage of vile smears from her pro-women stance, some even coming from the UN itself.
Some international and regional organizations, influence groups, and governments have called me regressive, racist, colonial, transphobic, fascist, and Nazi for this and other positions that I have had.
So the reason why we want to point out J.K. Rowling of the UN is that J.K. Rowling is incredibly liberal. She's not conservative, she's not MAG, she's not anything like that. But in her mind, this is a very black and white issue. And that's what this person is saying as well, that she can't advocate for women that are marginalized or oppressed in certain countries if she can't say what a woman is.
Yeah, and in particular, this is just one of the many buzzwords thrown at her. Nazi is like the buzzword of the day, to villainize people that are standing up for really biological facts and dealing with an issue that's very serious all around the globe, that women are being not just marginalized, but violently attacked. And they have to be able to identify who these women are, where they are, in a very complicated global landscape where women have different rights and are facing different levels of violence depending on where they are all around the world. And the challenge here is people talking past each other on an issue that deeply affects vulnerable populations, especially vulnerable effects of women, vulnerable populations of women. And that's the most horrifying part of what she's dealing with.
Yeah, man. We have more freedom in this country than just about anywhere. The biggest issue here is for kids, and that's a bigger topic.